Flashing green, flashing green.
I need
All
the
my
people to
run-on
do the work.
sentences. Make this look like someone who can write.
I'm sure
No,
they're good.
me, it's who was already in trouble.
I wore my animal socks though.
Those are really cute, I was gonna say.
We ready?
Those are-
Good evening and welcome to the City Council Study Session meeting of Tuesday, December 17th, 2024. There are two items on the agenda. The first of these is discussion regarding updates to the animals ordinance. Ms. Jeannie Snyder.
I've said I would never do this again, and here I am. I think we've gone through three major revisions, and this is just this is really just some housekeeping items. A few things we've noticed in the ordinances is about definitions. So it's not as major, because the chapter for animals has literally been one chapter. We have changed from the first word to the last one over the last 12 years or something. First I want to introduce, this is Kelly Robertson. She's the shelter manager. Major Barber, he's her supervisor, I guess, but we know who does all the work. And this is Dr. Amy Tyler, our veterinarian out there. So as you all know, we have an excellent staff. And so some of these were brought to us by staff and things that we've noticed over time. I handed out to you a copy of the full, it's all the ordinances, and it's, the green is what we're adding, red is what we would be taking away. This is a new kind of a software program through MuniCode that I'm trying to learn on how to change the ordinances. So if you see anything weird looking in there, it's because I haven't got Brenda to help me fix it up totally yet, but it does give a good way to look at what we're making changes. One, we're gonna add the definition of abandoned. And once I go through this, we'll go through, then we can have Kelly will let you know exactly with some examples on why we need this. But it's not that easy to determine if that animal has been abandoned or not. So it's a voluntary relinquishment of an animal. And we use animal instead of dog or cat because we've been changing that over time, because it could be another animal. We get rabbits, ferrets, birds, donkeys, all kinds of stuff at the animal shelter. So we have been making the change to say animal and not just dogs and cats. But not limited to vacating the premises and leaving the animal in or at the premises, or leaving, dumping, discarding at the Norman Animal Shelter without staff approval. And there are some examples that people just want to leave them at the gate. We tell them we don't have space for them. They drive down the road about 2 feet and, dump the animals there. So we've had a number of examples, I don't think you think of all of them, but we've had instances where animals are just abandoned at the shelter. We don't have room. You have to make contact with a staff member before you can just leave an animal, because we're overcrowded all the time and we don't have room for every animal. They make space. Kelly makes space for a lot of animals in her office, but.
Just to let you guys know, we have never stopped taking in stray animals from the general public. If it's actually a stray animal and it needs to be at the facility, it is always taken in. The abandoned at the shelter would be if somebody found a stray in Oklahoma City and we tell them, you can't leave that animal here, you have to take it to the Oklahoma City shelter. And they say, well, I'm not doing that, I'm leaving and you're keeping this dog. And so that would make it against city ordinance for them to do that. And also if somebody were to tie a dog to the gate, or leave a box of kittens at the gate and drive off, or leave the shelter and dump it at Highway 9 in Jenkins, situations like that. There would never be a time that somebody brought a stray animal that they found in our city limits and we refused to bring it into the shelter.
The next one is, we added the definition of animal, just so, like I said, it's not just dogs and cats. It covers mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, other invertebrates, wild and domesticated species, other than a human. So they get all those there. I'll have Kelly talk about this in just a minute. We're adding the definition of community cat, which is an outdoor, unowned, free-roaming kitten or dog cat that could be friendly, feral, healthy, sick, sterilized, or unsterilized. And then also a community cat caregiver, and that is a person who provides food, shelter, or medical, I can see all my typing errors here. Care to a community cat will not be considered the owner, custodian, harbor, controller, or keeper of a community cat. So this is new, and why did we want to add that?
This will make more sense when we get into the revision of the TNR, which is the Trap, Neuter, Return program that we have. because our old ordinance, it had talked about the TNR program, but it didn't give the definition of what is a community cat, what is a community cat caregiver. And it just said, yes, we do TNR, and yes, this is how we do it, but it didn't go into depth enough about it. So the definition of a community cat and a community cat caregiver will make more sense whenever we get into the revision of the actual trap, neuter, return program that we do at the shelter.
And, because we're just right now in definitions, if you'll flip over to page 3, we've added a long, a pretty lengthy new definition for exotic wildlife and native wildlife, and we're deleting our old one. I'll let Kelly talk about that, and she can give you some instances, but weekly, we find exotic animals or native wildlife that our people are keeping in their homes, monkeys, a variety of things. Monkey this week, Kelly called me back, we've got a monkey in the house. So tell them a little bit about it.
This came into play, we had a exotic animal that was kept in the city limits that got away. It was a Coatimundi, which is, if you don't know what those are, they call them Mexican raccoons, but they're exotic animals. And by our definition, and by what anybody that would own an animal, I think, would consider. It got away from the owners in the city limits. It was found on a playground. So it was a huge concern for us that our previous definition of exotic wildlife did not include the species of animal. So we went through and just went through anything and everything that you could consider an exotic animal, or that we would consider an exotic animal. Now, this isn't going to include animals that you can buy at PetSmart, like ferrets and rabbits and guinea pigs and, stuff like that. But it is going to include primates. It is now going to include the Coatimundi, which still resides in our city limits. So once this goes into effect, we'll be able to relocate that animal outside of the city.
And I know the definition has lots of words that mean things that you'd have to go to Google to figure out, but Kelly and her staff has researched this pretty thoroughly. I'll say that, our shelter is probably one of the premier shelters in the state, and they certainly know what they're doing. I'm not the caller owner.
Okay, I'll just jump in. I was gonna say, so do we have anything about invasive species and how that's defined? And how that might be different than an exotic?
Not that I'm aware of. What are you referring to?
Do people, I'm just thinking about pythons and things like that, that could be invasive, and what do we do with an animal that is invasive, or, a problem in a
Non-native.
There is something in here about snakes. It's what?
In the exception,
I see family
don't we still have the,
Boidae, such as boas and pythons.
It's in 8,
2B.
2A and 2B.
2B.
I just, so can people get a permit to have an exotic animal in city limits?
No, and that
Okay.
was something that I considered, was setting up like a committee of people that could approve or disapprove somebody to own an exotic animal. And it just was kind of agreed upon amongst everybody that was not something that we wanted to do.
And so therefore, all the exotic wildlife and native wildlife, those are not animals you can own. And if somebody has them, then they can't stay in city limits.
They can't stay in the city limits.
don't we still have a register for reptiles?
We do have a registry for reptiles. It's not all reptiles. I mean, people could still own snakes for pets. They still sell snakes at our pet stores in town, so it's not gonna be, it's not something that's gonna be, if it's not a dog or a cat, you can't own it. It's just kind of narrows it down to things that would normally be kept as pets.
There's not like the snakes specifically. When we did this last update, probably 6-7 years ago, We had a lot of discussion about that, and there's no registration for them. What we ask people to do is tell us where they have them, so that when their house does catch fire or a tornado hits it and they live next to a creek, because we have one with hundreds of them in it, we need to know, obviously, for public safety purposes. And so we do ask people to do that. I can promise you they don't always. But if it but like that one in particular, I don't know if they're still there at the time, phenomenally immaculate house, very, very well kept. Animals are extremely well cared for. The concern was if something happens to their home, we wanna make sure that we can respond appropriately.
Right. Well, and also you wouldn't want them creating a problem like you see in Florida.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Fortunately, you're the medical person, our weather usually helps that to some degree, because it gets so cold here, they don't do well in the winter.
Yeah, well,
But it could be a long fall for sure. For those of us that are not big snake people.
Yeah, on that same note, when we did visit that last time, we saw a lot of people come to City Hall that own
Well, snake.
exotic animals, or snakes, and were very against us banning them or doing anything to stop them from having them. They were very vocal about it.
I feel like this is very reasonable as far as that goes. If you look at C, it says except as expressly provided in this chapter, exotic animals do not include. And so then it goes into reptiles, boas, pythons, snakes that are not hazardous to human life.
And the exotic animals, the ones we don't allow, they're not, that also applies to agricultural, any farmland, like someone can't have a farm and also have these types of animals.
Correct.
And so is a liger and a tigon allowed in Norman city limits?
Do you have one?
No.
No,
No.
it is not.
But if it's not expressly written, I wasn't sure.
I believe,
Even though they're sort of rare, but there are some that live in Oklahoma, that place in Tuttle.
it would be covered under the family Felidae, is that
Okay.
correct?
So it
Yes.
falls underneath that, even though if it doesn't, and then any other exotic animal, it doesn't have to be specifically written out that specific one, it could be.
It's the family.
Yes, it falls under that family or that class.
And Kelly's got to remember, anything that's native to Oklahoma is already prohibited by state law.
Yes.
So you won't see those things like the deer and the red fox and those type things that's in there, because they're already prohibited. So we don't have to have a city ordinance on those.
And I don't know of anybody that has a liger or a tigon in Norman, so, okay, yeah, I just wanted to clarify those points. Thanks.
They get it's more calls than you think on animals that should not be in people's homes. And then if we didn't have them specifically listed, how do we, but they have great relationships with all kinds of folks. There's a monkey primate, is it Tuttle or Newcastle? Sanctuary.
They're in Newcastle, the
I mean,
Oklahoma Primate
So
Sanctuary.
there's lots of resources, and we learned a lot, if you were here a few years ago when we had the 360 animals out of east.
Oh, yeah,
But they have great relationships with all kinds of resources. The next definition, and flip to page 6, is the TNR, the trap, neuter, return, process of humanly trapping, sterilizing, vaccinating for rabies, ear tipping community cats and returning them to their original location. And we'll catch up on that here in just a minute, but ear tipping is, Dr. Tyler, do you do most of that on the, how many do you think we do it?
I looked it up the other day, we've done about 250 so far this year.
Or they're little, if you see a cat with its left ear tipped out roaming around, that means it's been brought to the shelter, it's been spayed or neutered, and it's a dose of vaccination, I believe. And then, but they're feral, so they can't survive, they're not domesticated, they're gonna go back to their community, but Dr. Tyler does take care of them when they make it to the shelter. A lot of these, you'll see through here where it's marked out shelter and come in as center, it's kind of a housekeeping, I would say, that it's called the center, not the shelter, and that was language we've been needing to change. We've also put in there Kelly's position and Trey's position wasn't listed in there properly, and then we also have a supervisor. So some of that, that is throughout the ordinances. The next main thing, section 403. This is where, on page 11, Kelly. That language is added, where it will be unlawful for any person to keep or maintain or allowed to keep any exotic wildlife species that are venomous to human beings. And so if they're I guess Dr. Tyler, a snake or something that's venomous, they would not be allowed. So we've added that as a prohibition in the city. Also added down there on zoos, we did not have any zoos right now. If we did, we're asking that they be certified. It's been quite a while since Little River Zoo had been in operation. It's been a long time. So we've had some people inquire about that, but we do not have any zoos at this time.
Is that a state certification or whatever the correct word is?
That is,
So the AZA and the ZAA are both national certifications for zoos. It's like the Oklahoma City Zoo has those certifications. Very hard to get, very, very hard to get.
page 12 goes into, I just put C handout there on the community cat. And Kelly, maybe you want to just touch on a few of those. That's for the TNR cats.
Yes, so this is just talking about the community cats. This is something that we already do. And if you go back to page 9 on section H, the part that's marked out on there is what this used to. It's basically the TNR program that we do. So on page 9, section H, that's what it used to say about the TNR program. So then when you go to page 12, this is the new version of the TNR program, which is more in depth and explains the program a lot better than the previous ordinance about it. I'm not gonna read it word for word, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
I was gonna ask, just because this came up in my ward recently, about community cats and the push and pull between people who are taking care of them and the people who do not want them on their property. I was gonna say, so it sounds like by these definitions, community cat caregivers are empowered to reclaim impounded community cats without proof of ownership and all that. I'm just like glancing over this. Does this kind of outline like best practices for these groups? I see-
Absolutely, yeah, this is taken from recommendations through the Best Friends Animal Society, which is the leading, most progressive shelter training programs that you can get into. And it was actually revised by the Jinx Oklahoma, the community cat program and their TNR program. And so when I reached out to Best Friends and asked them for kind of guidance about updating the community cat ordinance to national standards, they referred me to Jinx and said that Jinx had just updated their ordinances. And so I stole them from Jinx.
I see the benefit of it. I'm just thinking about a particular situation where somebody would want to trap the cats, take them to the Norman Animal Welfare, but then you would have the cat caregivers come get them out and put them. Yes. So I was wondering about that, and then also with an update of this, would this be something, is there a registry of cat caregivers where they can connect and be like, this is what we're doing, these are best practices we're adopting?
We don't have a official group at this time, but Dr. Tyler and I are working on getting like a training put together for people that are interested in participating in the program. Right now, the people that are bringing us cats for trap, neuter, return are primarily people that are their cats. It's cats that are living on their property, and they're stray cats that have wandered up that are feral, and they want them to stay, but they don't want them to reproduce.
Okay.
So that's mostly what we're getting right now.
And I was just gonna say, the particular incident I'm referencing, I think involved that property owner who did not live at the rentals, engaging in some,
I spoke with him.
some things. So for the protection of the cats, and then also when you have these frictions, I'm glad to see this and hear that there is something coming in the future to help those folks that wanna help cats, do that in a way. I don't know what would happen with the property owner that doesn't live there, that doesn't want the animals, or if there were businesses. I do know there's maybe some back and forth between people who are feeding cats at City Hall too, cause one time I was leaving and a lady was complaining that the city takes away the food, but she just comes right back, so.
You know, in that quandary, especially around City Hall that we can share, we understand the heart to wanna feed that cat, but we also, it feeds the skunks, and then we have skunks living in our doorways, and then I have employees being chased by skunks, and I can show you some of the funniest videos. We won't name names, but it happens, and there really isn't a way to separate what you're feeding or how you're feeding the cats unless, if we can find best practices, say if you feed them this way, the skunks won't show up, because that's the challenge we deal with here, and I don't know if other homeowners or property owners have been experiencing that.
I'm happy to hear that's on the horizon, definitely support it, would also happily tell people who are at odds with cat caregivers and, their property, this is on the horizon.
So Your Honor, what we'll do is, when those trainings take place, we'll make sure Bryce is able to get footage of them. We'd be able to post links and share that training with anybody. Just click the link and just like you were sitting right there in the classroom. So we'll make it easily accessible.
Kelly, they're not exempt from the nuisance ordinance either, correct?
No, so if there is a citizen that is having problems with a feral cat the cat is being a nuisance and they don't want the cat on their property, we do have a barn cat program, and we will take feral cats in and put them into barn homes or shop homes or something like that. So I definitely will work with people if they have cats that are causing problems for them.
Like killing wildlife.
I'm not gonna tell them tough luck. I'm definitely gonna help.
When it's really when people call and ask and look over those parameters, most of them are reasonable, some, not the situation you're talking about, it's not always reasonable.
That was extreme.
It was. If you look, I think it's between page 5 and 6, my numbering's not the same, there's a definition of a nuisance animal in ordinance. And they're obvious when they happen. And if that animal's not surviving in that environment and they're gonna have harm otherwise, then the barn cat program is a perfect place for them to go.
Okay. Appreciate it.
I was just gonna actually ask the same question about if there was a registry for caregivers, so appreciate that.
And so on page 13, it's one of the amendments that we've changed it from dog or cat to any animal, so it covers more than that. The one on cruelty to animals, I wanted to add that too. I added willfully or maliciously. Maliciously was already there. Willfully is in state statute. I had an animal cruelty trial in municipal court, and the judge just didn't believe it was a malicious that the dog was left back there with no water and the puppy, and so he found him not guilty, and I was kind of cranky about it, that he would do that because how old was that puppy? It wasn't very old, and it was in the hot, and it was in a little cage and didn't have any water, and the judge just didn't feel like it was a malicious. So state statute does say willfully, so I've been wanting to add that for a while. We rarely have a trial on that. Most people plead to it, but I wanted to add that because I got my feelings hurt on that one. I didn't like that. The last one that we're showing here is we want to repeal or delete the pet license requirement, and Kelly, and how all that says in there, again, I'm gonna need Brenda's help on getting this through final approval, but tell him a little bit, Kelly, on why microchipping is what's more effective than pet licensing, and that we don't really get that many.
So if you guys don't know this, I worked for the animal shelter in 1994. And in 1994, we had city pet licenses, and they were great, and they were a great way to get pets back to their owners. Well, since then, now everybody microchips their animals. And I've been the manager there for almost 3 years now. I've not seen an animal come into the shelter wearing a city pet license. But we have animals come in every single day with microchips. We do offer microchips at the shelter to pet owners, and we do not sell near the amount of city pet licenses that you would think, according to if we kept it in ordinances, if everybody in the city of Norman licensed every animal they owned. So it's just not an effective enforceable ordinance. It's not an effective way to get pets home to their owners. And we would like to replace pet licensing with microchipping of animals.
Don't we, Kelly, when they're in the field, if they find a dog and they can microchip it from the trucks, and they'll, instead of, to keep the animal from going to the shelter, they take the animal home. So, you know, the goal is to never let that, we don't want animals to come if their family's just around the corner. And so we do take, they, not we, they do take the animals home. So, I know
Yeah,
for.
they carry microchip scanners in their trucks, so they, on the side of the road, can scan a dog, and then they can just drive it home and not even bring it to the shelter.
That was kind of gonna be my question. Are you guys required to scan for microchips?
Yes, every animal that comes into the shelter or is picked up by an officer is scanned for a microchip.
I was gonna say, so were the pet licenses just kind of trying to, a mechanism to get folks to do these good best practices with their animals, like to make sure that they can get back to them? And it sounds like, I know there's a free microchipping event coming up on Friday. Are there probably other ways to get those behaviors you wanna see from people without requiring a pet license? 'Cause it was like, I remember it was less if your animal was spayed or neutered.
We've had a great success with, Dr. Tyler has been phenomenal with our, what we call the SNP program, which is free spay and neuter for animals for low-income families in the city of Norman. And we have, I don't even know how many, I wish I knew now.
And today it was over 300 since SNP started.
So-
And we've done Best Friends of Pets before that, June.
So since June, Dr. Tyler has spayed and neutered over 300 owned animals of residents of the city of Norman at no cost to them through our spay neuter initiative. And it's grant funded in our budget. So
Way more participation than doing a pet license, where
Way
it's
more.
gonna be less if you go out of your way and do that.
and we, when I say we, I mean Dr. Tyler and her staff are promoting that program, going out into 2 events and getting people to sign up, taking the paperwork with them and saying, here, I will help you sign up to get your animal into the
And
shelter.
we microwave every animal that leaves.
We microchip them.
You're not leaving if you microwave. Then we'd be in trouble. We microchip them, so we microchip every animal that. And then there'd be lawsuits, and I'd be really busy.
Yeah, so when they come in for the spay neuter, for the SNP, they are spayed, neutered, microchipped, and vaccinated before they leave the shelter.
Lube oil filter.
That sounds more effective than the other things, so.
So, just direction on this, we'll probably get it moved forward in one of the January meetings. And there might, if we come across, Kelly, we found a couple little spots today that we needed to delete the pet licensing as identification, so we might come up with a few more of those items. And if it's anything major that we come back up with when it comes before, we'll bring it up.
Does anybody object to that? Yes, sir.
And I just had a quick comment / question. I actually got my cat a rescue and brought her up there, or him up there a couple of weeks ago to get microchipped and fixed. So you guys are doing an amazing job. So keep it up. That program is an amazing program. You can apply online for it. It takes 5 minutes, if that. So keep it up. And when I was up there, y'all had quite a few animals for adoption. Do y'all still have?
We're full, yes.
You're full.
Yes.
Okay. Well, since we're on camera, I thought we'd get
We
that
are.
out there. So, and yeah, and great job. I think this is great. The only thing we've had it brought up at council a few times about allowing goats inside the city limit. So if anybody would ever want to entertain that, I grew up on a farm and I think a single goat is not a nuisance at all. So that's something I would,
They're not.
Well, that,
they are not.
that did come up at a council meeting a couple of.
Right, and it's come up more than once from different people, so.
The issue was, cause I'm remembering, I know, there's a lady that I used to know that lives up by Hollywood Corners, that I know she had a bunch of goats. And the issue there was setback. It wasn't that you couldn't have a goat, it's just the ordinance requires a setback.
Right, inside here, I think it says it has to be 100 feet from the nearest dwelling and then 25 feet from the property line.
They're allowed in A1 and 2.
Yeah.
So, to come see across from Roosevelt School, it's a couple acres, it looks like, so they meet the setback, so they have goats.
Because we do allow 4 chickens, laying hens, no roosters, and I don't think a goat would be any more inconvenient or any bigger of a nuisance than making any more noise than half the dogs in the neighborhood, so.
Well,
If we
the
can look
question
at
on that is if the purpose
All
of
right, well,
those
we'll move
goats
forward
is to
with
sit
that and I'll
down-
get it on an agenda in January sometime.
If the purpose of those goats is to be mowing lawns, mowing rough areas, eating the stuff that goats eat, through stickers and all, will this be able to carry people, if they have them tethered? We do that in California in a lot of the places, particularly where munitions were, it might not be exploded. So they put the goats out there to mow the grass. And then they were great. I mean, they just eat the grass and do stuff. But do we have provision in there so that people could, I think for Trey,
Yeah, we
what's
talked-
his name? He was talking, Kirby, thank you. We were talking about that park that's down there, used to be Mattoon's property. And being able, it's rough country, you couldn't get a mower through that, but you could get a goat through that, no problem, and they'd be contained. Will this help us with that?
There's nothing in here about goats.
Either in support of or in
It's-
opposition to.
We haven't changed anything about that.
They're not allowed.
Well, they are allowed.
They are.
In A1 and 2, not in
They're allowed in any use district, but you have to have the setback. So that was the difficulty. The difficulty, as I understand it, and I was talking to Mr. Kirby, is when he takes the goats, they have to stay there for a couple of days. And I think that's what the rub was, is I've got these goats, I bring them here for the purpose of mowing this grass, but then the neighbor sees them there more than a day or so and starts to complain because there's no setback. So you'd almost have to craft some language if you wanted to do that, that would allow goats for the
Mowing.
purpose of mowing the lawn without having to comply with the setback.
Could that be like a business permit though? Like, it's not like they're farming the goats on site. It would just be like, I'm performing a service by clearing your brush with
Right.
these animals for a couple days.
I think you still would have to amend the animal welfare ordinances, because right now as they exist, if you're keeping goats, you have to have a setback.
Okay.
It's interesting.
Would we, Councilmember?
I was just gonna ask what is the purpose of the setback?
So that they don't bug your neighbors. I mean, that's pretty much the purpose of the setback.
So
for
is
all
it
of our-
because of the sound they make? Is that what bugs people, or what do they do that makes
It's
people?
for all wildlife though, it's not, like all farm animals, it's not just goats.
Yeah, for
Like cows,
chickens
pigs,
and all
chickens,
that
they
stuff,
all
you have to have the setback.
Oh, I said that.
Yeah. And it's how many feet
25 feet?
from the
25 feet.
fence?
But it's gotta be 100 feet from
Or
the
from the
nearest,
house, I mean?
nearest neighbor, nearest neighbor's house.
Nearest neighbor, not your own house.
Six, you're not
I'd
gonna fit.
suggest we make that as a change to what you got here.
Well, and, yeah,
Just to be
we'll
able
take
to
a peek.
include goat mowing.
Yeah, to figure out if there's another spot in the municipal code where it would live. Yeah, because that, I mean,
It's not allowing a single.
it's a thing, it's a business thing.
Would
We
go
called
for
the
the mower.
city on code, you're like, oh, I can look at permit, and it was filed for this job.
So, yeah, we'll work on that. There's gotta be a solution out there. We'll bring you.
Lawnmowers don't have catalytic converters, so they're horrible for the environment.
Lawnmower,
I was
oh, not
gonna-
the goats, the
No,
lawnmower.
I was gonna also
Most
say,
don't have them.
if we're talking about commercial lawn mowing services, I mean, a commercial lawn mowing service with all that equipment is not gonna leave their equipment there overnight. So if we're talking about using goats to clear an area, then they probably go back to wherever they're okay and then come back the next day, like they don't just have to stay there until it's done. I mean, it
That'd be a
doesn't.
good solution.
And my understanding is they do stay there until they're done, at least that's the way that Mr. Kirby was explaining it to me. and he leaves them there for a couple of days for them to take care of the grass.
Well, that's before the ordinance is written.
That's the problem, is the way the ordinance is written, you have to have the setback if you're keeping them. I guess the
Yeah, and
question
we're
then
not-
becomes,
How do you define keeping
how do you
them?
define keeping?
They're not being kept on that site, they're just being utilized by the site. We'll
Hmm.
find a solution for this.
It seems like there's
Solve that
language
problem.
there.
Well, this
This
is
is excellent,
specific, it
okay.
says such animals maintained in a single family, two-family, or multifamily district are not permitted closer than.
Well, that's all I'm saying though, is if we're talking about using a goat like a piece of lawn equipment, then I would think that it would have controls the same way. And you wouldn't be maintaining the goats at Camp Wilmatoon for more than a day and a half. That would not be maintaining, that would be using them,
I think
and then they go home.
it's possible to try to craft an exemption, and then it's gonna come down to how it's enforced, cause there's probably some areas in Norman where if you said you can leave them there no more than 3 days, when it comes day 3, minute number 1, somebody's gonna be on the phone saying, they were here longer than 3 days, so it's gonna become you could probably craft an exemption for that, and it may be just the issue of, it'll come down.
There are some businesses that utilize goats in that way, but they have portable fencing. And I think they generally then house the goats overnight, and then put them back out in the portable fencing the
That would
following
make total
day.
sense.
That would make sense to me too. And I've seen the goats in action. You have to watch them to move the fences where you want them to go, or else they'll eat. I mean, they may even eat the fence. So,
Cans.
your cans and everything else.
They eat everything. They just leave some pellets behind them.
Excellent work.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
The ones that are interactive.
So I'm gonna hand out, this is for the next parts on boards and commissions, there's not, it's the same look, there's a few changes there. Jane has got some other information first, and then there's just some little changes along the way that we've talked about it a few times.
We'll keep it going quick. We don't get off in a crazy tangents.
Goat commission.
We're into that, so
I know better than to do that.
I've seen those videos on Instagram. Guys drops them off, puts up temporary fencing. There's nothing but pellets. 3 days later.
I mean, we had cows, goats, chickens, everything else. My grandpa used to milk it. Big goat milk and all that kind of stuff, yeah.
Well, I just, no, not much, because I think I'm just at the last few. They have this one. It's easy for me to read from here.
Ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you. So Jane Hudson, I'm the planning director. And I want to go over just a couple things because we are talking about boards and commissions. I just wanted to cover a few things regarding Greenbelt. And there's been discussion many times about whether or not we would still be getting easements, right-of-way area for sidewalks, trails, I use that term loosely, but when we go through the plating process, we're looking at Norman Rule certificates of survey, and within those, we typically get an easement. And when I say that, we're talking about the rural areas out 36th and further east. Sometimes we have them on the west side as well. But when that process comes forward, there is an easement along the street. However, as it says, the project is not completed at that time. Typically, we would be waiting for a project that the city would be bringing through and putting a sidewalk in. But again, you're really talking about areas that are rural, so 48, 60, so on and so forth. And then when we bring forward preliminary plats and the final plats, the sidewalks, and I italicize this here, that, sidewalks can be classified as trails. And they are included, depending on the road classification that is listed in the 2014 transportation plan, they will typically be constructed with that development. And so you're looking at the rural collectors, again, those would be the COS, and there's no trail easement out there. But then when you go further in, you're looking at principal or minor arterials. And as an example, you would get a 20-foot easement. This would be what we just did recently on Liberty Point, which was that RV park down south. And when constructed, that will be a 10-foot sidewalk. Then you have the minor urban arterials. There's no trail easement, but the right-of-way is sufficient for sidewalks. And you're looking at those designations such Cedar Lane and like Tecumseh Road.
Jean, part of the reasoning for those that weren't involved in it before, that she's providing this information is because the discussion has been to consolidate Planning Commission, I'm sorry, Parks Board, Greenbelt Commission, and Tree Board, all under the umbrella of Parks Board. And there have been some comments in the past that, well, we might lose the ability to get our trail easements and all of that. And so what she's showing you now is that there's lots of check and points along the development process where those are going to be dedicated to the city anyway, and that would happen with or without a Greenbelt Commission or a tree board.
Right,
So-
sorry, we have, I think,
we could have flipped our
yeah, I think you could have gone
presentations, but,
first. Okay.
because my last thing was repeal Greenbelt
Yeah.
Commission.
So with the preliminary plats, the final plats that come forward, you get the right-of-way, and you would get the sidewalks in there. And then also, I wanted to add in here that we have the multimodal trails, and those are the separated transportation routes. There's the trail along the railroad, along Highway 9, out to the lake, the soon-to-be-completed loop that's going around the airport. And those have still continued to come forward even without, that they didn't have anything to do with Greenbelt Commission reviewing any of those areas, and there's been no funding through Greenbelt for those. The plan is, if there's any questions, but many of you are familiar with the Greenbelt Priority Trail System that was adopted a few years ago, and it is planned that that will actually go forward in the Parks and Cultural Master Plan that we're working on right now. Then there's also the Parks and Open Space component, but Board of Parks Commissioners, they actually accept property through a vote. Greenbelt does not cannot accept property through any of the reviews that they do. And the last bullet, the authority for acceptance for trails parks, it does not come from Greenbelt. There's no funding, and like I said, they cannot accept property. So like I said, I think we kind of did do this out of order. I'm sorry, I think we should have had Jeannie go first, but this is where Jeannie's presentation starts, and I'll let her go over that with you.
If you flip to, sorry, I'll just switch it over here. Yeah, I'm looking, we both looked at it and we're like, oh, we were backwards. And so I'll totally start backwards, is that one of the recommendations is to repeal the tree board and the Greenbelt Commission. And Jane just went over the reasons for that. They'll still be in the Parks Board authority to preside over the matters contained in what they're working on in health and safety for tree protection. So there's still going to be ordinance and authority for protection of trees. It's just not gonna be the tree board. The Parks Board would take care of all that. I know we've kind of put this off a little bit because I think we've been working on the tree ordinance, and there's been a lot of work and ongoing work on that end that Ashlyn in our office is working on. And that, I think that's one reason, we kind of kept waiting for that, but that's pretty well underway. And we wanted to go ahead and bring these other small items I have here in just a minute before council, but Jane wanted to let you know that repealing the Greenbelt doesn't mean that we're going to lose any they don't have the authority to do what's already allowed to do. So if you've got any questions about that.
If I remember from our discussion at the retreat, this was all an attempt to basically streamline the process and reduce the burden on staff and kind of, do more with less, be more efficient with our resources.
Can I say, also, it's actually, when we have applicants come forward and they've hired an engineer, surveyor, attorney,
they're paying them to come to these meetings for, sometimes our meetings are 10 minutes, but it's, you know, it's an expense that they wouldn't have to pay.
I was gonna ask also, so is Tree Board and Greenbelt Commission, they're more advisory roles than any kind of regulatory?
I will speak for Greenbelt, that is correct.
Okay.
I don't know about Tree.
Yeah, tree board, they don't make policy, they have reviewed the tree ordinance and advised, but they can't make policy and they have no budget for any project.
So in consolidating these, we're still having the oversight and under the entity that can actually regulate. Okay.
And I believe that they are coming forward with this, as I asked Ashlyn, this tree protection that still will be moving forward in the next few months. We just put it on this because we're gonna do some changes, minor changes a little bit to the boards and commissions. So now flat back to the middle. Sorry to keeping you awake here by going back and forth. Out of all those discussions that have been happening for the last number, 2 or 3 years, I think 2 years, about boards and commissions, it did come from council that on Board of Adjustment to increase from 5 to 7 people for 3 years. And so that also, I needed to change 36-750 D2 from 3 to 4 members. That was recommended in a number of meetings that had gone on through council. City Planning Commission, I wasn't sure if this was one that had been totally agreed on, but Jane and I didn't want to leave it out in case it was up for discussion, that should there be a member from each ward and one at large? I mean, that's not how it is now, right?
I totally support it, 1 member from each ward, and I'll put it on the record because I think, you know, depending on where the project's happening, you want somebody from that community to be able to, in theory, weigh in on things that concern that ward. So for, you know, my ward, I would hope my planning commissioner is always asking about stormwater and maybe how people intend to do parking and shared parking and walking.
And I would say the opposite. It's very hard to find qualified people that will go ward by ward. A lot of times if you look at the education levels as they go across, or the professional levels as they go across the wards, that's not evenly distributed. And so sometimes it's easier, not easier, but the best candidate is found not in that ward, but who may be able to serve. So it's something we still gotta figure out, because it's hard. I'll sit down there, Brenda will tell me there's a spot and you've gotta find somebody in Ward 1 or whatever, and I don't know of anybody who's got an engineering license or something like that in Ward 1 have to come to you to get an answer, and you may not know that person. It doesn't mean that.
Some of the wards are just difficult to get applications from. And even the council members working with it, you know, prospective council member for that ward, a lot of times they even have a hard time getting someone to volunteer to participate. So you can kind of hamstring yourself a little bit by doing it that way, but I understand why it was council wanted to do that.
And is there a requirement to get onto planning commission that you have to have an engineer background, or could you, I mean, like, if you thought about it, Ward 5, somebody who's in agriculture would also be good on planning commission. No requirement, okay. I think Matt was next then.
Yeah, I would just say this is something that I've advocated for the past, 4.5 years. And my experience in Oklahoma City is this is definitely how they do it up there. Every council member kind of has their planning commissioner that they can, I don't want to say lean on, but they can have that dialogue back and forth to work out issues in the ward. And so I'm all for it. I think it's a great change. I definitely get the hang up of trying to find adequate people to serve, but yeah, I kind of think you put it back on the council member and let them, if there's an opening, go find.
You'll get some that stay open for a while.
And that's, the risk is the seat just stays vacant a little longer because.
Well, in all honesty, planning commission in most other cities is kind of a prerequisite for running for city council. Like, you don't run for city council until you've served on planning commission, because it's just it's how you get your feet underneath you. And so I don't I don't think it's a horrible thing to make this word specific at all.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, even though Ward 7 can be difficult to find people, there was a time where the planning commission had like 3 Ward 3 people and 2 or 3 Ward 4 people, and there was no Ward 5 person and no Ward 7 person. The largest ward in the city not having anybody on the planning commission seems to be, especially how many of their residents feel about city issues and government and what's going on. And so I wouldn't necessarily want to require that they all be from each ward, but maybe that be a preferred option. And then should we not be able to find somebody in Ward 7, then it could come from, we could appoint somebody from another ward, but maybe there's a limit on how many can be from each ward. Like there can't be 3 Ward 3 people.
I would agree with that.
Something like that.
I would agree with that.
So where it's not set in stone that it has to be, but that is the identified preferred,
So you say like a 2 or 3 month vacancy and then you're pulling from.
something like that. where
Yeah,
it's
so
like
the
if this-
council member could say, I've tried, I can't find anybody, put it back in front of the whole
And
council.
maybe that's a month or maybe 2, but not a very long period. Say if you can't find anybody within 4 or 5 weeks or 8 weeks, then we're looking at the big pool of people, something like that.
Do we know how close we are to that currently? Like, do we have representation from every ward now?
We would have to start staggering. I mean, there'd need to be a process as people roll off. It's full now, there's 9 members now.
Probably don't want to tie it to council terms, like you don't want to make it 2 years, you want to keep it so there's.
Well, we got the terms, it's just,
A little
they're
more
not all board
continuity,
specific
yeah.
now, so we'd have to it'd have to be kind of a slow rotation.
We currently have, it's pretty diverse, right now. You have 2 people from Ward 3, 1 person from Ward 1, 1 person from Ward 5, 1 person from Ward 7, person from Ward 8, and then 1 from Ward 2. So you've got almost everyone.
Ward 4.
Sometimes we get lucky.
Yeah, there's one, there is one on Ward 4. I'm sorry, did I skip that?
6 was the only one that I didn't hear?
6 was the only one I didn't hear. Yeah,
3.
you're correct.
Oh, we've got
3
5
has,
Ward
3
3
has
is
2. Well, wait a minute.
Let's rush
Okay.
Decent distribution.
We try. I mean, but I think having it down as a principle to run on, that works. It makes us not load up the side, because it is hard.
Yeah.
Obviously, with 100 square miles, Ward 5 needs to say something.
Yeah, see if the council member can find somebody, and then if they can't.
You know, in 8 weeks, I think, you know, because at certain times of the year, it's easier than others to make, I mean, holiday season, it's a challenge to get a hold of anybody you're looking for. So I think if we wrote it in to say, if the council member representing that ward hasn't found a representative within 8 weeks.
2 meetings, like, we don't want any planning commissioner seat to stay vacant for more than 2
2
meetings.
Yeah,
meetings.
what's the rule? If you miss 3 meetings, you get removed from planning commission? Okay, so.
And that's all the boards.
Love it.
Is that consecutive or?
I
Three,
think it's
3
consecutive.
regularly scheduled meetings, yes, that are
In a row.
consecutive, in a row, yeah.
It's not us, it's them. We can change that if you want to.
One I noticed I didn't get on there, there had been discussion about because of the repealing of the tree board, perhaps one member into parks should have at least an interest or expertise in urban forestry.
So you'd have 10 people on there? Or
Well,
that'd
there's
be-
9, it would start, if we needed, the next one would have to, we have 1. It doesn't say ward specific. That was a suggestion, I did not get that on the PowerPoint.
We currently have, we haven't reappointed or made any appointments on Parks Board or Tree Board, and Greenbelt. We've been holding it for the last few months because we knew this was coming forward, so there'll be some consolidation of some of the members, or at least try to have that background, but it'll be a process of staggering them off.
That's what I was gonna ask about, like, are there vacancies coming on Parks Board?
They're sitting there right now.
Okay.
So this will work well.
Board of Appeals it had been discussed to go to a 3-year terms to make all those the same. I noticed on the historic district, there, it was okay with the 9 persons in 3 years, but it also had this extra sentence in there about that they'd be nominated by the mayor and confirmed by the council. Well, that doesn't need to be in there. That's already done, so I elected to take that out. And then the Norman Election Commission was not listed on there, and it's also listed in the section 10, and I added it there.
That's a hard one.
Yeah, part of the reasoning, staff requested these Board of Adjustment and Election Commission be increased to 7 members. When you have a 5-member committee, sometimes it's hard to get a quorum, especially if you're not meeting every month, like the Election Commission. Adding a couple of more members, at least you might be able, you won't have to cancel meetings and things of that nature. And the same thing with Board of Adjustment, but they do meet monthly, but currently it says they have to, 3 members, requires 3 members voting yes to pass anything, basically. And with a 5-member board, sometimes that may be difficult. So adding a couple of members kind of allows the board to function a little better from time to time.
And so and then the last was when you look at the sample there, the red lining is the tree board and the green belt commission. My last is on the last page, and it's all green because it would be brand new. We have the Animal Welfare Oversight Committee now. We've had it since, it's been a long time, but it was only put together by a resolution due to when we were first getting the Denise Miles Adoption Center. It really didn't, if there have been no terms. We have 1 member that's been on there for 20 years. And so we've needed to codify this for a long time. And they understand, they know it's coming. All of the members have been on there for a long time. They're a very dedicated group, but they know that they're going to start being rotated off, and we'll stagger that also. But if you just read for the purpose of the Animal Welfare Oversight Commission is to provide advice and recommendations to the City Council related to the Norman Animal Shelter and issues pertaining to animal care and welfare, animal rescue, fostering and adoption, control of animal population, standard for animal shelters, recruiting volunteers, budget priorities as identified by the Commission, and suggest modifications to the ordinances. There would be 7 members. It's stating it doesn't have to be a veterinarian, but we would prefer a veterinarian, somebody from a local animal welfare organization, and a citizen from the rural area. If you know, and everybody knows about the Norman Animal Welfare Committee, they do that and more. They're a very active committee. I know they're probably reluctant to be rotated up, but I think that this group has done a lot of work for the progress of the shelter. Mark Howery has been on from the get-go, literally for 20 years. And he's ready to rotate off. They're like, yeah, somebody's forcing me off now.
And I apologize for continuing to speak out, but some of this history goes way back. So the Animal Welfare Oversight Commission, committee, like she stated, was established by resolution during that pet adoption facility being constructed. And it was a lot to do with education on spay neuter, the programs that they were really established to do. Nothing that's delineated up there is currently in that resolution. So they have actively participated in a lot of those areas already at the request of council.
So we better write it down.
So it was just felt like that the duties needed to get codified, and it allows them to function like they're currently functioning without any.
And they needed terms. They needed to be able to rotate off. That's all I have on that. I think we've discussed that. We've had prior meetings, some of the newer council members perhaps, I know haven't, but that's always been supported by council.
Questions or thoughts or comments? Seems like everybody's in agreement with you. You're right, that pretty good.
Genie's on a roll.
One thing is a point of privilege. Major Barber and I have been talking about disaster training for us. Remember we did that 2 years ago, something like that. What you guys is interest in it? Would you rather have it of a weekend? Would you rather have it of a weekday? just thinking what we'd be able to do is familiarize ourselves with what do you do when there's a tornado goes through town or something goes through town? And what do we as individuals do? Where do we congregate? All the rest of that. Would you like that kind of thing? Seems to be general
And
agreement.
now with the full operation of the Emergency Communications and Operations Center and the ability for that facility to coordinate with this room and be fully connected with the new technology, we kind of recognize an opportunity for elected officials, communications staff to be housed here, in that when the press needs to talk to you, we've got a great place for them to be, we've got parking, and they're not in the middle of operations where we're trying to move resources and address the emergency at hand. So we as staff, we will participate, and I think we'll be able to, you know, go through an exercise and figure out how we will coordinate, work together with the new facility up and running, and now our new technology that will allow us. It sounds good in my head.
Yeah.
We just want to try it out a couple times and make sure it actually functions the way we think it will.
Would you rather do that of a Saturday?
It's probably better for me.
Weekdays better?
Makes no difference to me.
Makes no difference.
Is that so, no, who else was with, me and you
I did it.
and you, on that Saturday we hung out here.
Yeah, it'll be somewhat similar and somewhat different, right? We'll go down the rabbit holes you all want, or what we've conceptually talked about, I'm making no promises. Is that we would probably meet out there so that you all can kind of see what we're doing, so you understand some of our operations and things. So you can help better adapt yourselves, but also be able to answer questions to your constituents. You all done a phenomenal job during the tornado of answering questions. Being that spokesperson for the community is our biggest role at that point, getting us information. So we want you all to see what we're envisioning that looking like, but then also kind of setting those expectations and kind of requests from the mayor of, you know, what he needs and how to congregate you all, because there's also limits on where we have you all. There's open records limitations to being at that building in groups, so
So it looks like there's
kind of combing
support
that.
to schedule something and move on, and I think that's all we're gonna talk about tonight on that, since it's not on our agenda.
That's right.
Good job, Brenda.
And so maybe, we'll find maybe either a Tuesday afternoon where your usual coming this way anyway, or a Thursday afternoon, so it's not a new ripple in your calendar. We'll try to take advantage of a date that you've probably already booked out for council work, anything.
Well, at Brenda's advice, we are adjourned.